The Embassy of France in Washington, D.C., is the French diplomatic mission to the United States. It is located at 4101 Reservoir Road, Northwest, Washington, D.C., just north of Georgetown University. The embassy opened in 1984. With some 400 staffers, it is France's largest foreign embassy. The embassy represents the interests of France and French citizens in the United States and conducts the majority of diplomatic work on such interests within the U.S. The embassy is headed by the French ambassador to the United States, currently Philippe Etienne. In addition to the standard diplomatic facilities, the compound includes La Maison Française, a cultural facility consisting of an auditorium, ballroom, and exhibition hall. Like many embassies, it regularly hosts events for the general public including concerts, films, dance, exhibitions, lectures and theater. The embassy operates several services and offices, responsible for different areas of policy and for liaising with relevant American bodies. The most notable of the services are listed below. The Chancery is the main diplomatic and political body. It is responsible for coordination with the American government on matters that affect France, particularly foreign policy. However, diplomacy is primarily conducted by the ambassador, leaving the Chancery to liaise with the French government and coordinate with the press service in matters of public policy. The diplomats of the Chancery take responsibility for a specific policy area and may stand in for the ambassador in his absence. The Chancery has attachés based in each of the 10 regional consulates. The press service is responsible for the publication of the embassy's newsletter and magazine, as well as coordinating press releases and conferences, including the provision of designated spokesmen. The office also monitors American press coverage on issues pertaining to France and reports back to the ambassador and to Paris. These officers promote cooperation between the two countries on military and defense matters. The primary responsibility of the former is to facilitate liaison between the two government departments and the two nations' militaries, while latter oversees cooperation on matters of armaments and has responsibility for arms spending in the U.S. as well as working with the U.S. to develop new military technology. Both officers have a role to play in keeping the ambassador abreast of current defense issues and advising the Pentagon on French defense policy. The cultural services of the embassy is located at 972 Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, New York City. Its responsibility is to facilitate cultural exchange between the two nations, a role that can be creative, informative or merely administrative. The duties of the service include promoting French creative works in cultural and academic institutions from across France, with the help of the attachés in regional consulates. The Office of Science and Technology is tasked with OS&T is an active, reactive and proactive observer of scientific activity, technological innovations and their impact on the U.S. society and beyond. OS&T is headquartered at the Washington, D.C. Embassy and has teams at the French consulates of Atlanta, Boston, Chicago, Houston, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. OS&T collaborates with French research agencies, universities, engineering schools, and competitiveness clusters. This is the office primarily concerned with maintaining and developing new trade links between the countries. For example, it assists French businesses trying to establish themselves in the US and vice versa. It also helps large and small French businesses which have long since established themselves in the American market, providing support and advice on economic and trade policies, both within the US and in France. This office represents the French Treasury in the United States and Canada. It works in close partnership with the Federal Reserve, the Department of the Treasury in French and American financial institutions. Its role is to develop French economic policy in conjunction with the aforementioned bodies and to explain the policies to the United States. It has two offices, one in the embassy and a second in New York, from where it can work with Wall Street in order to better develop monetary policy. In 2006, an employee of the cultural service of the French embassy was fired for the motive of being pregnant and Muslim. A judge ruled. She worked at the cultural services of the French embassy in Washington, D.C., where she said her co-workers and leadership harassed her, called her a terrorist, and told her she couldn't wear a religious veil. Her leadership never took any action to protect her. The remarks continued until she announced her pregnancy to the employer and was fired. The court found that the plaintiff was referred to as a terrorist, learned her supervisor at the French embassy hated Indians and Pakistanis, and was otherwise insulted on the